Despite discouraging polling and reported pressure from an increasingly worried Barack Obama, President Biden's re-election campaign has announced that they've entered 2024 with a staggering $117 million in cash on hand and seek to remind the American people that Democrats have a record to run on, something that liberal Fox News commentator Jessica Tarlov was eager to remind her right-wing co-hosts. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at. And again, as befits the new year, new mentality approach that I'm trying to take, it is relatively optimistic. As a reminder, I am a pessimist by nature, right? I tend to see the glass as half empty rather than half full. And we're entering a high stakes election cycle up against a full-blown fascist and a fascistic party. And right now, in many areas, President Biden is unfortunately weaker in terms of public perception than he needs to be. But there's still plenty of time to turn it around. And there is still good news, plenty of good news. But one of the things that's been talked about recently is reported pressure from former President Barack Obama, Joe Biden's ex-boss, a guy who won both of his presidential elections. So somebody who is a winner and somebody who's in a position to give advice, right? Now, this has been all over the Beltway media. It's been talked about quite a bit. Jen Psaki, an MSNBC commentator and former Biden employee and Obama employee for that matter, had an interview with Quentin Fulks, who is one of the primary campaign managers of the Biden team, and asked Quentin to address this head on.
So I'm sure you're aware and you've talked about it. There were a few stories recently about some views of my former boss, Barack Obama, about the functioning of the Biden team and whether there should be greater communication between Delaware and the White House, whether things should be faster. What's your view?
Look, I think what President Obama is talking about there is just urgency. And the one thing is that he feels that urgency. I know that former First Lady Michelle Obama was out there talking about it. She feels that urgency. Our campaign feels that urgency. Most importantly, Joe Biden feels that urgency.
That's good, because again, as somebody who naturally skews towards pessimism, sometimes I worry that President Biden is too confident in his approach. Axios has a really good article about this, discussing the kind of the triggering event, which is behind the curtain why Obama and Dems fear Biden complacency. We're not going to read the whole thing, but lots of high-level Democrats are warning that President Biden and his re-election team are too complacent and unimaginative about the threat of losing to Donald Trump. The latest alarm was sounded Saturday in a leak to the Washington Post about a private meeting in which former President Obama pointed Biden to a different way to attack his campaign. We're told it was a lunch before the holidays. Obama pushed Biden to consider moving his political operation outside of and beyond his White House advisors. Obama also recommended that Biden seek counsel from Obama's former campaign aides, which Biden officials say they've done. And this is a quote: "Someone wants to light a fire under the asses of these people," a top Democratic strategist told Axios. Okay. Jim Messina, manager of Obama's re-election campaign, often warns Democrats not to be worrywart bedwetters. The strategist added, "It's hard to call it bedwetting when it's Barack Obama." So, right. So the idea is Barack Obama, again, a legendary two-time winner, regardless of what you think about his policies. But the fact of the matter is, Obama was a winner with respect to elections, and he was also legendarily stoic. So for him to be concerned, you should take it seriously. Many high-level Democrats think it's not fine. They fear the president's political machine hasn't found the sweet spot between a chill zen and dangerous complacency and has been way too zen. Again, it's kind of like this Goldilocks zone, and I'm not even sure I could articulate it. We don't want, the president running around or his team saying that the building's on fire, but we do want them to recognize in sobering tones that Donald Trump is a threat, not just an aspiration, but in terms of his political chances, right? Donald Trump is both incredibly dangerous aspirationally, and he's also in a position to potentially win re-election. That's just the reality. And so I do agree that Biden and the Democrats need to assure the American people, hey, we do recognize this is serious, that we can't just be on autopilot. We're not going to be running around freaking out, but we get you. We get that you're concerned. You have every reason to be concerned. We are concerned, but we're also confident finding that sweet spot. This was something that was addressed on the most recent episode of The Five on the Fox Propaganda Network. Jessica Tarlov, again, the only sane voice on that show and probably the only sane voice on the network, took glee in pointing out the winning record that Democrats have despite the news of tensions between Biden and Obama.
I wouldn't say that they think that they can butt heads with them, but they do have a good record to run on in terms of winning elections. Jesse can say what he wants about 2020. We know Joe Biden is president. Then Democrats went on to win the midterms, shocked everyone, right? The red wave that didn't happen. And we've done super well on all of the ballot referendums that have been going on all over the country, especially in conservative states, fueled by Gen Z voter turnout. So young people seem to be liking Democrats fine. The Obama people know what they're talking about the ground game. We're here in Iowa, where Barack Obama became a sensation and shocked everyone when he won Iowa in 2008. And you can learn a thing or two from them. But for instance, the fundraising numbers came out today. Joe Biden, $97 million taken in Q4, $117 million on hand. His team is outpacing what the Obama campaign did in 2011. So at the end, exactly this period in time, but in 2011. 97% are grassroots donations. I've heard, oh, well, that's, Hunter Biden's friends in Ukraine or in China that are sending that money over. No, it's regular people that want to support Joe Biden for president. And if you look at the Real Clear Politics average, Donald Trump is up by 1 percentage point now in the average of the polls. So it doesn't seem that bad within the margin of error. It's going to be close. But the Biden campaign has a lot to be proud of.
Jessica Tarlov is, of course, again, one of the most effective advocates for the Biden record and the Biden ground game, just period, and certainly on the Fox Propaganda Network. And it's true, her right-wing co-hosts are always, if they acknowledge any positives or any, positive facts about President Biden and his record as president or his campaign, if they do acknowledge it at all, it's fleeting. So it's good that she's there to constantly remind people. And when I hear her and people like Simon Rosenberg talk about the accomplishments of the Democratic Party and the president, it helps hype this cynic up. Now, again, the 97 million figure, it's awesome, right? It's better than what President Obama did in 2011 during his reelection campaign. Not quite as high as what former President Donald Trump did in 2019 heading into the 2020 election. But right now, Biden is vastly out fundraising Donald Trump and the other Republican candidates. That might change once the Republican primary is effectively over. But right now, President Biden has a colossal cash advantage. Again, 97 million in Q4, heading into 2024 with 117 million total. Again, impressive things. And again, the campaign effectively for Biden has only just begun. Simon Rosenberg, who I mentioned just a few seconds ago and who I mentioned quite a bit in videos on this channel. This is a guy who predicted that the 2022 midterms would not manifest in a red wave. He was one of the few commentators to analyze it correctly. And he thinks that once it comes down to or tapers off into a binary, and as we get closer to the election, that Donald Trump's own toxicity will help undermine him.
Yeah, I think there are two things in our politics now that are being overly discounted by the commentariat right now. One is the strength of the Democratic Party in election after election going back since Dobbs in the spring of 2022. We just keep winning everywhere. We keep outperforming expectations everywhere in all kinds of races. That's really good for us and really bad for them. And to me, it's the most important electoral data that really exists today. The second thing that I think is being overly discounted is Trump's awfulness. I think that, right now, you spent most of this show talking about the legal machinations, but we need to start to move this into the political dimension, not into just the legal dimension. And for example, what we already know, that's already happened, we know from polling, when people are asked if he's committed crimes, will it change your vote? He loses substantial support in every poll that's been taken that starts to ask these questions. And look what he's already done, Lawrence. I mean, let's get into the reality of where we already are. A court has already determined that he committed insurrection against the United States. A court has already determined that he committed sexual assault against a woman in a dressing room in a department store. A court has already determined that he committed massive fraud. These things are already known. And I think that when you look at all the terribles and the awfuls and we start introducing them to voters, this guy's going to have a very, very hard time winning the election in November.
So I just realized I had that at 1.25 speed. Sorry about that. That's why Simon Rosenberg sounded like he just smashed a Red Bull right before that interview. I hope he's correct. Again, he was correct on his 2022 midterm predictions. He's a very sharp guy. He used to work for President Clinton, and he's been a policy wonk and a data geek for the past 30 years. Hopefully he is correct. Now, I think one of the things that's important there is he says that we have to remind the American people about things that are already known of Donald Trump to help President Biden win. The fact that he was found to have been liable for sexual abuse and defamation for his crimes against E. Jean Carroll. This is Donald Trump. As a matter of fact, the presiding judge put it very bluntly. In common parlance, Donald Trump raped E. Jean Carroll, right? So that's who President Biden is running against. The fact that he indeed has been found by a court of law to have committed insurrection. That was the Colorado District Court. It was upheld by the Colorado Supreme Court. All of these things, because of the American people's short attention span, we have to constantly remind people. Again, facts don't speak for themselves. They never have. They never will. Democrats have to relentlessly, nonstop, not for a second. They have to hammer Trump as we get closer to the election. They should certainly start now, in my opinion. Last clip I want to play. This is Democratic Governor Tim Walz, who is just one of the best in terms of accomplishments in the country. This is how he looks at the current political landscape. And again, as we get closer to the election, just to end on another optimistic note.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that President Biden faces. One of the big issues is his age. You've been an outspoken defender on this issue. This week, the First Lady went so far as to say it's an asset, but voters aren't buying that. What does the campaign need to do to address this issue?
Well, first, there is something to be said about age and wisdom, and I think results matter. Look, I served in Congress for years and watched Infrastructure Week come and go. I've watched Joe Biden deliver on a historic infrastructure act that's building roads and bridges across Minnesota, Iowa, and the rest of the country. And I think it's, as you start to see here, where the choice becomes the binary choice between Donald Trump and disdain for the rule of law and Joe Biden competency on getting things done, that overweighs that.
I hope he's correct. Again, there's plenty for the president and Democrats to run on. It's just about conveying it persuasively to the American people who have, again, a very short attention span, a short memory. But I think once it tapers off into a choice, the president's chances get that much better. But again, some optimistic news as we, again, enter 2024 properly. Let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you think that it's too optimistic, not optimistic enough. Let me know what you think.